So the president nominated a woman named Betsy DeVos to be Secretary of Education, and this nomination has caused a lot of controversy. It has extremely upset a lot of people in public education because apparently Ms. DeVos has a lot of experience in the private sector and in the business world especially, but not necessarily public education. I cannot say that I've had a strong opinion regarding her one way or the other, because my attitude toward education is in the United States is not really that great. I am a person who has given up on the idea that a lot of experience in a particular field of endeavor is necessarily the best qualification, because whether you talk about education or anything else, a lot of times experienced people are more or less set in their ways, and that is they keep doing things the same old bureaucratic way that has been done before and has failed before. I have a brother-in-law who was an educator for a while in the state of Louisiana. He's no longer in the education business. As a matter of fact, he's retired. He has stated repeatedly how unhappy he is with what he's seen in public schools. As a matter of fact, when one of his kids was younger and they were taking the child to a new school for an orientation, the teachers stood up to speak to the parents and students, and this person who was going to be his child's English teacher made something like the following statement. She held up a textbook and said, and this was supposedly an English teacher, she held up this textbook and said, "The book that we be using this semester," and Curtis just went ballistic. I don't think he did it right there, but he told the principal, "You need to get some qualified teachers in here." And I agree, because the dominant language that we have in the United States is the English language based on the Anglo-Saxon language that you had in Great Britain, and that is the official language that we have in the United States. I call it an official language because the Declaration and the Constitution were written in that language, and whether it's statutorily the official language or not, that makes it official enough for me. But I certainly agree that someone who said the textbook that we be using this semester should not be teaching English, because that's nowhere near anything approaching proper English. Then in my college years, which I actually was a non-traditional student, I heard some very negative comments about public education from university professors. Dr. Vesey, who taught a public administration class that I was taking, talked about what a lousy job public schools were doing and the students that they sent to colleges and universities. Another political science professor, actually Dr. Ralph Savage, said that educational standards in the United States were bad and that they were deteriorating and continuing to get worse. And I think that I do see evidence of that. As a matter of fact, I recorded another video the other day called Intellectual Desert USA, because I get the opinion, I get the impression from popular culture and from a lot of things that I see here and read on the internet that people in America are just fundamentally dumb. Now, when it comes to university professors and people who teach at that level, they don't study education courses. They simply study their major subject and their minor subject, and of course when they join university faculty, they're going to teach their major subject. And the teaching is based on knowledge of that subject and whatever teaching methods they pick up with as students along the way. They don't spend a lot of time in taking education so-called courses. And I think that maybe is the best way to prepare teachers. That is, let them concentrate on getting the knowledge of the subject rather than all of these education courses. Because I think a lot of times in public education, public school teachers, I'm not sure exactly how they are trained. I know that you can major in education at colleges and universities, but I think that they get a lot of information sometimes that people who design curricula for public school teachers and also who design curricula for public schools a lot of times seem to have strange ideas about the way students learn. They really do. I'll tell you how I think students learn best. There are certain courses where you have to work on the mechanics. English grammar is one of those. You learn that through practice. Another one is mathematics. Now, I hate the way mathematics is taught in the United States, because the way it's generally taught, and as far as I can tell this is true at all levels of education in the United States, is that math teachers simply give not very good explanations that nobody understands, and then they throw a ton of homework at you and expect you to be able to do it. Meanwhile, half the people are thoroughly confused. Somebody asked me one time, have you ever had a bad math teacher? My response to that, I've never had a good math teacher. I'm horrible at math to this very day. And that started long, long ago, actually in about the 3rd or 4th grade. I was having trouble with multiplication and division by then. I'm better at those things now, but you get outside of whole numbers and basic arithmetic, and sometimes I even have trouble with that when it concerns fractions. But I'm not a good math person at all. And I hate the way math is taught. I think there ought to be some kind of way where they could focus more on the explanation of how things work, rather than just throwing tons of homework at people and expecting them to get it. Also, math textbooks. I've never read a math textbook. I've got maybe 3 in this house, a couple of algebra books, and nothing they say makes any sense. They essentially just throw it at you. So the people who write math textbooks and design some public education curricula are in the same boat and doing the same thing as far as I'm concerned. Still, English grammar and mathematics are 2 areas where you need to focus on mechanics. But what about classes where you don't have to focus on mechanics, where it's mostly acquiring head knowledge? And in the elementary school and high school, I would say that those would be science classes, history classes, social studies classes, and classes in the humanities. In those areas, I think the best way to learn, that students learn, is to be taught the way Dr. Savage taught us political science in Modern Political Theory, International Relations, and Governments of Asia. And what he did, he told us at the beginning of the semester, there is no textbook. You will be writing textbook. And then he would give about an hour and a half speech, and we would write notes as fast as we could possibly write them. And then there were 3 tests that semester, and those would determine your grade. And you got ready for those tests by studying your notes. You would read your notes over and over and over again. And I did this, and I got A's on all of my tests in every one of Dr. Savage's class. I learned a lot. But then, you know, there are other humanities classes, and it starts in elementary school and middle school and even in high school, actually, where teachers have students doing an awful lot of busy work. Now, I've never understood this need or focus on homework so much, because to me, learning should take place in the school. That class work and class lessons are where the learning should take place, and it shouldn't be taken home to be done, because it's the teacher's job to teach. That's the way I've always felt about it. I felt that way as an elementary school student and also as a high school student. I never liked homework, but when I did it, I'd do it in study hall at school, because in those days, I don't know if they still have them, but in those days we had an unencumbered class called study hall, where that was your opportunity during the school day to study or do assignments, and I'd do assignments during study hall and not be involved with them at home. I hated doing that stuff at home. And with regard to humanities type classes, I don't think that homework assignments help students learn that much anyway. I think it's mostly busy work just for the sake of busy work, because as a college student, I found the best way to learn was lectures, note writing, and studying. And then, as I say, in math and English grammar and composition, you do have to focus on the mechanics. A lot of mechanics involved in composition. I'll never forget one of my first composition classes at the college level. I had a bad habit of using semicolons a lot, which the instructor announced to the whole class, talking about different things that people did, and he said, McWhirter likes to use semicolons, but he'll get over it. And eventually I did. I think You focus on mechanics in math and grammar, but in other areas, lectures and tests are the way to go. That's always the way I've learned best, and I don't know why teachers and professors can't focus on that more. I really don't know why. And I don't understand the need for all of these education classes that they take in their teachers' colleges either. Because like I said, I think people get some strange ideas about the way students learn. Now, I went to a school, when I started school, I was in first grade at this school that burned down after the first year. And it was an old and rather traditional type school with separate classrooms and the big hallways and the centrally located bathrooms and cafeteria and all that. Well, that school burned. And so then we spent a couple of years attending classes in churches around the area because the school board made deals with churches for us to attend there. I don't know if that could even be done now. It might violate something or other. But they built a brand new school for us, and in the designing and construction of this school, there were some ideas people had about education that got incorporated into the school. This new school building consisted of two very large wings. It was a brick building, and it consisted of two very large wings. On the left side, you had the lower grades. On the right side, you had the higher grades, which I was in at this time because we moved into that school at the beginning of my fourth grade year. And then in the center, there was a central corridor with an office and a library, and that section kind of divided the two wings. And then toward the rear, you had a lunchroom. Well, the main wings of the school were not divided into classrooms as such. Instead, you had, I think there were about four of them, four big areas that classes would meet in. The classrooms were not separate at all. Instead, you had these big areas where classes would each have their own area, but it was still sort of in a large, big room. And it actually did work pretty well. The acoustics were such that if you were taking your class in this one area, you were in the science area, you couldn't necessarily hear what was going on in the math area. The acoustics were pretty good, even though you're kind of all in the big same room and just in separate areas. And I think there were, on our wing of the school, there was one large wall that kind of separated, I think, the fourth and fifth grade from the 4, 5, 6, 7, from the 6th and 7th grade, because our elementary school went through 7 grades and then you went straight to high school. And so in the 4th and 5th area, and then you had the 6th and 7th area, and those were in two separate big large rooms where you could see all the way across the main room and you could see the different classes. And the dividing spaces that you had between classroom areas were these big large mobile chalkboards. They were all green chalkboards that rolled on wheels, and those were kind of the dividers between class areas. And you had this big common space out between, and there was a green carpet on the floor through the entire area, except for around the edges where you had the restrooms. And a matter of fact, our principal, Mr. Gilmore, before we moved in, told us that in the new school we'd be able to go barefoot all day if we wanted to. No problem there. That didn't, at the time it seemed a little strange, but it doesn't now. It actually works very well in a well-maintained, safe environment. There's no problem with it at all. So the classes being in the big rooms and each just having kind of their own little area, that did work pretty well. I have to say that worked pretty well. The barefoot at school all day worked pretty well. Like I said, it was a carpeted area. The acoustics were such that noise didn't drift a lot between the areas, even though you could see what was going on in different classes. It worked very well with the teacher there in your own little area. So those were some things that worked very well. Now, things got a little crazy when it came to the grading system, because somebody decided that instead of A, B, C, D, and F, we would have E for excellent, G for good, S for satisfactory, P for poor, and U for unsatisfactory. Okay, that's a little strange, but it's not too odd. But the thing is, when you get ready to go to high school, that has to be translated back into the old system. So I don't know why they went to the new system to start with when they had an old system that was just fine. The other really weird thing that they did, the two main weird things I would say, that grading system and the fact that they sort of tried to do away with grades, with having first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth grade. They divided us into something called units. And instead of saying we were in like the fourth grade, they would say we were in like Unit K or something like that. And this probably was the weirdest part of the changes, but within these units, you would have 2 grades in every unit. And like this first unit I was in, it started as soon as we moved over there. So 4th grade and 5th grade. I was in 4th grade, so we had 4th graders and 5th graders together in this one unit, and 4th and 5th graders would go from class to class and take the same classes together. Now, I don't know how they made a difference between the different grades, because you still sort of had to have grades, because when you moved to high school, then you were going to be in 8th grade and not some damn unit. But, you know, that really was a little bit bizarre that they tried to have units instead of grades, and yet they still had grades. Why did they do these things? Well, it's because different people have different ideas about how school should run and how students should learn, and I think that was some of the things that they were teaching in education courses at the time. Now, some of those things were not problems. The big open areas instead of classrooms, that worked fine. I'm normally a type of guy, like in an office environment, I want closed office scheme. In my house, I want a closed floor plan. But in that school that was kind of an open plan, I felt like that worked pretty well. The not having that many walls, it worked okay. The carpet on the floor worked fine. Students going barefoot all day, it worked fine too. The grading system was a little bit weird, but it wasn't too hard to understand. But then things got kind of weirded out with this trying to sort of do away with grades and have units instead, and at the same time having grades. But, you know, that's what people study, I think, in education classes, the different ideas about how people learn. And some of those changes were okay, but the trying to merge grades and units, that was really weird. And that was because of some off-the-cuff idea that somebody had. We emerged from that school, my class did, and went on to high school relatively unscathed, I think. My math problem stayed with me forever because I was never taught well at that school. But, you know, so people have all kinds of ideas about how students learn. Mine are lectures, notes, and tests, and then classwork, work that you do in class, with the mechanics of grammar and mathematics, and a lot less homework. One thing I haven't seen over the years in education is I've never felt that it has been particularly student-centered. Now, they did some things to try to help us and make it a little better experience at the elementary school level, but the big problem that I have seen with education over the years, I've never seen it as being student-centered. It has tended to be more bureaucratically centered or maybe teacher-centered, and I've often felt that it hasn't been the welfare and the education of the students that have been emphasized. How can we change that so that student learning is the most important thing? I don't know. They talk about going to more local control. That won't work because then you'll have a patchwork system all over the United States. But then as you have a national framework, then you have people all over the United States who are objecting to what schools are being told to do from the central government. So I don't know what the answer is. School choice might be an answer if kids are allowed to go to schools where things can operate outside the public system. That might actually help some. I do know that I think we have a tremendous problem in the United States with people not being very smart, and some of that has to go back to public schools. What the solution is, I don't know. So I'm not opposed to Ms. DeVos. I think maybe somebody needs to get in there and shake things up, because there's a lot that I haven't seen that I haven't liked in public education over the years. Maybe some big changes need to happen with that system. But I know one thing, the big change I'd like to see in education, I don't know how to get there, but the big change would be to make education student-centered, because it's the students who are really important.